Good evening, everyone. As we begin the meeting, I will ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw forbids the use of mobile devices during council and committee meetings. I'll also note that Councillor Butwell is joining us via Zoom on the big screen. It's 6:30 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. And I'll begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. This land has a rich history and is covered by the Williams Treaty of 1923. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples and express our gratitude for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this territory. We commit to honoring and respecting the land, its history, and its current stewards as we strive to strengthen our relationship with Indigenous communities and work toward right relations together. A motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that Council approve the December 11th, 2023 Council Planning Meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion's carried. Deputy Clerk, we appear to have lost Councillor Butwell. Okay. Will you let me know when she does come in so that I can ask her about pecuniary interests? Members of council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. And there are none noted. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that council move into the statutory public meeting December 11th, 2023 at 6:32 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. The municipality takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives, including requiring developers to host information sessions in advance of providing the municipality a completed application. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning application in order to capture comments and concerns from the public. Council will then receive a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. After council has made our decision, any person or public body may appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as long as they have made an oral submission at the statutory public meeting where the planning matter was heard, or provided comments in writing to the clerk's office before or during the statutory public meeting where the planning matter was heard, and requested notice of the decision from the clerk's office. This is also true of any person or public body that wishes to participate in the appeal. For details or information on appealing decisions of council, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. We have one item in our statutory public meeting this evening. It is with the applicant Joshua Lech. It is a consent application, file B20-2023, and the location is 253 County Road 41. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed consent. For Mrs. Whiteman, who is also joining us on Zoom, good evening. By what method and on what date was notice of the consent application given?
Good evening, Mayor and everybody. Notice of the consent.
Hang on, Renee, we can't hear you. We're going to have to get the volume adjusted here.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Try now, Renee. Oh, that's me. Wow.
Okay.
Even I think that's a lot of Brian. Try now, Renee.
All right. Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment.
Still can't hear you. Hang on. Go ahead and test it out, Renee.
Hi, can you hear me?
Not yet. Try now.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay, not yet. Okay, try again.
Good evening, everybody.
No. No.
Good evening.
maybe. Is it coming through your laptop? Test again, Renee, please.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay, it's coming through Jessica's laptop, so we're going to put a microphone at her laptop and jerry rig something up, make it work. Try it now, Renee.
Okay, good evening, everybody.
Can council hear that? Can members of the public hear that? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. So by what method and on what date was notice of the consent application given, please?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by regular mail on November 21st, 2023 to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required the Planning Act. In addition, a sign notice was.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. She was freezing on Zoom, so that's why the sound cut out. If you turn her up, then I get ridiculously loud. No, that's for the speaker.
I can turn it up.
Turn it up and then turn it down when I go to speak. Let me ask her the question and then you can turn it up. Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. Would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the subject property has a total area of 14.27 hectares. The application requests a severance of approximately 0.16 hectares of land to merge in title with 235 County Road 41 as a lot addition. So the application has a purpose of expanding the size of the backyard of the property located at 235 County Road 41. There are no developments proposed in this application.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent application? There are none noted. Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed consent from members of council? And there are none noted. Mrs. Whiteman, do you have any final comments?
No final comments.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision on this application this evening? Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley. The council received the staff report dated December 11th, 2023 regarding consent application B20-2023 for 253 County Road 41. And further, that council grant provisional consent to application B20-2023 subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. Confirmation from the applicant's solicitor that the severed and benefiting lands will merge on title. The solicitor for the applicant shall submit an undertaking to the municipality to the following effect. I hereby personally undertake to prepare and register an application to consolidate parcels of those lands being the severed lands herein, and those lands being the benefiting lands herein, and provide to the municipality the registered application to consolidate parcels as soon as possible after registration of the severance, transfer, and designation of the new PIN to the severed lands. That subsections 3 and 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That all taxes on each of the lots to be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The OLS indicate in writing to the Department of Planning and Development that no encroachments of wells or septic systems will result from the lot addition conveyances. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. The owner provides the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent, and that the owner shall pay to the municipality cash in lieu of parkland an amount of $500. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And we'll close out the statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council move out of the statutory public meeting December 11th, 2023 at 6:41 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Okay. Our internet's probably not working. May I ask who's on the phone?
Well, that would be me. I got booted out of the Zoom call.
Councillor Butwell. Councillor
Yeah,
Butwell,
can you hear me?
hang on, something's working again.
Yeah, I messaged Jessica to send me a new link. So I'm calling in. This is the only way I can get in.
Well, you're here now, and I'll just ask, having reviewed the agenda, Councillor Butwell, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest?
No, I do not.
Thank you. For your information, we have made it through the statutory public meeting, and we are about to enter into planning and development reports.
All right. Thank you very much. I will be quiet now.
Very well. So we're now entering into the staff report portion of the meeting, and while this portion of the meeting remains open to the public, it is not a meeting at which the public will be asked to make comments or ask questions. Questions and comments with regard to the reports that are before council were received during the public consultations and or during the statutory public meeting. After council hears the staff report, council will make a decision on the staff recommendation. The planning decision is open to appeal, and any person or public body that participated in the statutory public meeting or provided information as part of the statutory public meeting process may file an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. For more information on the appeals process, you may contact the clerk's office or the Ontario Land Tribunal directly. The first report is with regard to applicant JRB Williams Enterprises, file number sub 2022-01 and Z13 2022, part of lot 33, concession C, Elgin Street East in Gosport. And Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Sorry, how's that?
Better.
Through the chair, I have a short presentation I would like to make at this time for council. And I'd just like to get things started by thanking people tonight, those of you who aren't seated at a table and required to be here through work or otherwise, through election. I appreciate everybody's participation in this process, especially at this very busy time of year. Thank you for bringing up the presentation, Jessica. And maybe even advance to the next slide. I'll get things moving along here. For those of you who aren't aware, my name is Ron Warren. I'm the manager of approvals with the municipality. I'm joined by Paul Walsh, our director of planning and development, and Leslie Whiteman, our director of public works and engineering. Mr. Kent Randall is a consulting agent and may be available if there's any questions for him. And next slide, thank you. As many are aware, this evening is a key critical decision point when it comes to processing the subject applications that are before council this evening. Basically, there are two things that council are being requested to make a decision on. One is the draft approval of a plan of condominium, subject to conditions of draft approval. The second is a zoning bylaw amendment to change the zoning on those subject lands to a particular zoning category and individual details that would allow that development to take place. Next slide, thank you. And so how did we get here? As you can see on the slide, it's basically broken up into seven layers, seven boxes there. We're at box 6, just to have an idea. Tonight is the council meeting for decision, which will be followed within 15 days with a notice of that decision. And for some of us, it's been 2.5 or 3 years. For myself, closer to about a year, dealing with the various stages of review, analysis, and public comment, which bring us to this council's decision this evening, and subsequent notice of decision or the clearance of conditions of draft approval. And should anybody appeal that decision. Next slide, please. Thank you. Subject lands, I think, will be already well known to most of the people in the room. Tonight, we're looking at the 2.6 hectare site in the Gosport neighborhood of Brighton. Lands to the west and to the south are low density residential. What is being proposed is meets the low density residential definition under our official plan. To the east is currently the Presqu'île Yacht Club. And to the north, of course, is the Presqu'île Bay provincially significant wetland. Next slide, please. Thank you. And what is being proposed, wish that had come in a little darker on that particular slide, but it's as I think most people are aware, it's a 32-unit residential condominium townhouse development on full municipal service, with access to be gained through a private condominium roadway, which will provide access to the units being proposed, as well as parking spaces for those units and visitor parking as well. Next slide. In support of these applications, the proponent submitted a number of technical documents, background studies, as we generally call them. Without going through the list of them, I can say that a number of them were peer reviewed by experts in their field, with full cost paid by the proponent. And I should stress that this remains an ongoing process at this time, as some of the work involved in this peer review will be a condition of the draft approval based on the decision this evening. It's typical of many of these studies. The one you get in the beginning is the preliminary one. The one that is finalized is through conditions of draft approval based on how the whole application goes and how the processing goes for it. Next slide, thank you. This slide, if you can see it fairly well, I wish again it was a little sharper, but it is a critical slide because it deals with the policy statements. And in the province of Ontario, policies, as we know, are generally provided through Queen's Park. They're put in place and implemented through local municipalities. And if I don't prefer to quote from or read slides directly, but I will take a look at this one. A decision of the council of a municipality, including a tribunal, shall be consistent with the policy statements issued that are in effect on the date of the decision, and shall conform with the provincial plans that are in effect on that date, or shall not conflict with them, as the case may be. This therefore means that in accordance with the Planning Act, all municipal council planning decisions in Ontario must be consistent with the policies of the provincial planning statement and the provincial growth plans. This helped form the basis of the staff recommendation for council's consideration, and what brings us to the recommendation tonight. Next slide, please. Thank you. Staff have confirmed that the subject applications are consistent with the applicable provincial legislation, and the subject development conforms to the purpose and intent of the official plan, both of the county and of the municipality. However, it is critical to note, and there's proof here tonight, that many individuals, particularly in the Gosport community, have made it clear that they certainly do not support this development. Although certainly not all, we have received a number of correspondence in favor of the application as well, is worth noting. But the majority do not support the proposed development within their neighborhood. Compatibility and environmental sensitivity have been the primary issues that we've been working with and grappling with in dealing with this application. They were identified as the key aspects of the proposal, probably from the very first pre-consultation meeting about 2.5 years ago. Compatibility, of course, does not necessarily mean that new built form should simulate or copy an existing neighborhood. In fact, our own official plan, endorsed by council and approved by council, encourages a diversity and range and mix of housing within neighborhoods. In terms of the natural environment, both the provincially significant wetland and species at risk have been a main focus of discussion. The updated environmental impact study, provided at first in support of the application and then revised due to in response to peer reviews, and will be further revised, provides a number of detailed mitigative measures and environmental monitoring programs, both during and post-construction, to protect environmental features, wildlife habitat, and species at risk. This was reviewed and accepted by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and have been included as conditions of draft approval. Next slide, please. The updated EIS, again, is the critical document of review for this proposed development. Again, it has not been finalized. It is in its state right now. It does conclude that there will be no negative impact on the natural heritage features or their ecological functions as identified within the PPS. Next slide, please. The key issues and concerns we're looking at, and any proposed development within an established neighborhood always raises issues and concerns. For each of the primary focus in reviewing this proposal, staff have found that the primary ones we're looking at are the impact on the wetlands, the compatibility of built form with adjacent properties in the Gosport neighborhood, increased traffic from development, impact on the species at risk, and municipal sanitary and water servicing have been the primary issues. Each one dealt with in more depth in the staff report that's provided. If there was anything that was left still as a bit of a compromise in the staff report leading to further revisions, we've required them to be cleaned up, as it were, through the conditions of draft approval, which need to be met in order for final consideration of draft approval, or final consideration of approval of the draft plan coming back to council. Next slide, please. The primary emphasis on the conditions of draft approval dealt not only with the additional peer review consultation work, specifically, again, the EIS, the geotechnical report, and the traffic report, Also, the extensive mitigation measures, so restricted months of construction, restricted months of when any activities can take place in water, making sure that spawning periods are recognized. Restrictions on clearing and setbacks, in addition to on-site controls during construction. Site plan level details of the physical structures and parking. These are generally considered, I would say, a site plan level of a process. It would deal with sediment and erosion control work, grading, site alterations, servicing, access, utilities, snow storage and removal, refuse storage and removal. These types of things would also be considered conditions of draft approval to be ironed out at the staff level and then brought back to council through their endorsement, which would be through final approval and entering into a condominium agreement with the proponent. And that's about the last slide I have, is just to thank you again to everybody here for participating tonight. And happy to answer any questions for me or the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I will read the motion and then I'll open the floor to questions from members of council. It's moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councilor Fredis. The council receives the staff report dated December 11th, 2023 regarding zoning bylaw amendment application Z13 2022 and draft plan of condominium application sub 2022-01 is prepared by staff. And further, that council enacts a bylaw as attached to amend zoning bylaw 140/2002 as amended in order to rezone the subject lands from the future development zone to the urban residential exception number 5 zone and environmental protection zone, including site-specific provisions in order to implement the development of the subject lands for a residential condominium townhouse development as otherwise detailed in this staff report. And further, that council grant draft approval to application sub 2022-01 subject to the conditions of draft approval provided in this report, and that staff report back to council with a recommendation on the final approval of the plan of condominium and entering into a condominium agreement. Are there questions or comments from members of council? Councilor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. I'm not sure whether I should direct this to Director Walsh or Director Whiteman or Mr. Warren, so I'll kind of throw it out there and let the three of you decide who would like to take it on. Pardon me. There was reference made to the traffic study, and I note from the documentation that Ainley did the study and Wills did the peer review and concurred with the Ainley assessment. They did a traffic study in January 2022 during a COVID lockdown when there was snow and freezing rain. Please, folks. The count was done during the peak hours of 7 a.m. To 10 a.m. and there were 72 vehicles, and from 3 to 6 p.m. when there were 152 vehicles. So the total for the 6-hour peak period was 224 vehicles, and that's a quarter of 24-hour cycle. So I simply multiplied that by 4 and got 896 vehicles in a day, although it's really impractical that you're going to get that sort of volume at 2 o'clock in the morning. But nevertheless, to be conservative in the assessment, I've done it that way. I then extended that over a 5-day cycle and got 4,480 vehicles. And Ainley, in their assessment in compensating for the COVID lockdown and more traditional usages, then projected that by an additional 30%, which gave them a theoretical 5,824 vehicles in that period. However, I was provided by staff with a Black Cat study done in June of the same year for Baldwin Street, and it indicated that the traffic volume during that period was actually 7,060 vehicles, which is 22% higher than the Ainley number reaffirmed or confirmed by Willis. So in light of that vast difference in traffic numbers, I have some questions about the validity of the assessment of the traffic study. That's the first part of the question. I can hold it there if you'd like to comment, or I can kind of carry on to what it leads to.
I'd ask you to carry on to what it leads to, please.
Okay. The next part of this is its relationship to the geotechnical support, and I note that you say that there's more work to be done there. Cambium alleges in their report that the soil at the site may be used as engineered backfill, but Alston Geotechnical indicated that the laboratory tests results that were in the Cambium report show that none of the tested materials meets Cambium's own criteria for acceptability for fill. So one has to reasonably assume then that the material would need to be removed from the site and suitable engineered fill brought in from elsewhere to provide a suitable base for the slabs. Now, there's no reference anywhere on the impact that heavy truck volumes might have on the existing infrastructure. I did a calculation, and I've again attempted to be conservative, and I've assumed that they would bring in 1/4 of a meter, 9 inches of soil to provide a dry base, and onto the site, and that would entail 1,466 heavy truckloads of fill. Now, if we apply our fill bylaw to that as intended to generate funding for road infrastructure repair caused by this sort of development, we would generate about $26,000 in revenue. There's a document out, but there's a law that is used by highway designers and engineers, and Director Whiteman, you're probably quite familiar with this, and forgive me if I'm, it's discussed as the generalized fourth power law. And the rule of thumb is when you're looking to assess relative damage on pavement, you work on the vehicle's weight and you assess it by axle. For example, in New Zealand, and I will cite this for you if I may, they did a quick calculation. In New Zealand, the heaviest vehicle allowed on some of their roads is they call a 50 max, which is 9 axles with a total weight of 50 tons. Yes. So the load per axle is 5.55 tons. The best-selling car in New Zealand in 2022 was a Mitsubishi Outlander, and it weighs 1.76 tons. So its load per axle is 0.88, and the truck is 5.55. So when they extend the differential to the fourth power, they come up with a number of 1582. So what it says in their case, it would take 1,582 car trips to do the same damage to the road that the one heavy truck did. And I thought, that's wonderful, but that's New Zealand, and let's do something closer to home. So I sat down and did the calculation. A standard triaxle dump truck here in Brighton is 30,000 pounds or 15 tons. So it's about 5 tons per axle. A Tesla Model 3, Councillor Weldon, is 2 axles, 4,000 pounds or 2 tons. So 1 ton per axle. And this is not my arithmetic. I actually turned to a professor who teaches mathematics and higher math, and he confirmed the numbers. So the fourth power law of 5/1 to the fourth power in this case equals 625. So what it tells you is it would take 625 Tesla 3 trips on Baldwin or Elgin to do the same damage as one of these triaxle trucks to our infrastructure. Now, recognizing that there are 1,446 of these coming in, if you'll forgive me while I call up my calculator. 1,446 of these trucks by 625 is 903,750 car trips to do the same damage to our infrastructure as these 1,400 trucks. So the other thing that I started thinking about as a result of this analysis and as arithmetic exercise is what will it cost to repair these roads? Because obviously we're going to accelerate their demise. And I looked at our current budget deliberations, and Director Whiteman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've put in it's about the same overall length as Baldwin and Elgin. Baldwin and Elgin may be a little longer, but I'll be conservative in my assessment. We'll
I
call
would
them
say
the same.
significantly longer, but you carry on.
I'm endeavoring to be conservative in my assessment, okay? So we're looking at potentially $1.3 million in capital infrastructure upgrade. And I'm not even talking about the collateral damage that would be done to Harbor, and that's a whole different set of arithmetic, from which we would net out $25,000 in fill by lot revenue. So my question is, with a $1.275 million shortfall for infrastructure repair, where does that come from? The tax base? Because the last time I looked, roughly speaking, every $100,000 increase in our budget is a 1% increase in taxes. So we're looking at potentially 13%. For 32 houses. So I'm having some difficulty with the economic justification for this development in light of those numbers. I yield.
Thank you, Councillor Fredis. I suspect we haven't gone down the road of determining where funds would come from for the development, as that would be in the next stages if council were to ask staff to go down that road. But I guess if there's comments from staff, I would ask for them now with regard to Councillor Fredis's comment.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Fredis, what he has stated, I haven't looked at that particular, I don't know that law in particular. It sounds familiar. There will be some damage to the roads from the truck that's coming.
Just draw the microphone closer, Leslie.
Oh, really close. Okay.
Really
Can you hear
close.
me? Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there will be some damage to the roads. There's no doubt about that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to let the director make his comments.
And
Thank you.
yes, but it's something that we need to look further into. I think we could look at conditions in terms of what development costs that we would incur and enter an agreement with the developer as such. But it is a bit of early days in estimation of what those costs would be and whether they would be significant and whether there are those costs that council can bear. So that's the best answer that I have at this point, given that we are we're in a conceptual design stage at this point.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. In the draft plan of agreement, or plan of approval rather, under 6D, it says the owner will satisfy the municipal engineer regarding an appropriate construction route of heavy trucks associated with construction activity of the development. A pre-construction survey of roadways shall be completed by the owner, who will be responsible for any roadway damages caused by heavy trucks associated with the construction of the development. It's included in our documents here.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon. Councillor Fredis.
To Councillor Wheeldon and I guess staff, so does that suggest then that we will extract from the developer an upfront certified check for 1.5 million plus for the repair?
I think that's highly unlikely, and I think we all know that's highly unlikely. I won't get staff to comment on that. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley, Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Thank you. And I just want to talk a little bit about the compatibility of the development that's going in. And I know staff, you've made the comments that, you know, we all support mixed uses. But I did take out of our official plan the idea that, so under 3.1.8, protection of neighborhood character, I'll just read a couple of sentences and then I'll also read something from the mature neighborhood study, which I know was basically focused on our downtown core. However, a neighborhood is a neighborhood regardless of where it is in the municipality. So under the protection of neighborhood character, while intensification, redevelopment, and renewal are encouraged, all development within the municipality shall have regard for the character and quality of established neighborhoods. Neighborhood character and the policies must be considered at all times in all neighborhoods. And I'm just not so sure that along Elgin Street, 3-story, not affordable as far as I'm concerned, development really kind of protects the character of what's already there. It's also, as I said, in our mature neighborhood study, the final report, which we received in October of 2019. Compatible means the development or redevelopment of land which incorporates regard for land area uses and neighborhood character. And I just don't see where this whole project is anywhere compatible to what we already have on Elgin Street. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley, or Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley. Are you looking for a comment from staff on that, or just making a comment with regard to the staff report?
Just making a comment for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon.
I do have a question for you, Councillor Rowley, because I don't have the mature neighborhood study from 2019. Does it define what character is?
Well, there is a sentence here, so I'll read it to you. So the proposed definition for neighborhood character is as follows, as per the mature neighborhood study. Neighborhood character means the collective physical qualities and characteristics which are prevalent in a neighborhood area or mature neighborhood and which informs its identity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. And am I correct in remembering that the mature neighborhood study was incorporated into our official plan?
Through the chair, I believe it was because I believe the councillor was speaking from the AOP.
Speaking from the final report of the mature neighborhood study.
Sure.
But I believe council adopted it as an official plan amendment.
I believe so.
And further, Mayor, I believe the consolidation of the official plan in 2020 include references to it.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Wright.
So anybody who knows me, this is going to be more probably of a comment than a question. Anybody who knows me knows that I am all about the birds and the nature that surrounds us. We live in a very privileged area that we do, and having the body of water of Lake Ontario and the wetlands that we have. There is a statement about building on or developing wetlands. Part 2 says, shall not be permitted on adjacent lands to provincially significant wetlands, including significant coastal wetlands, unless the ecological function of the adjacent lands that has been evaluated through an environmental impact study, and it has been determined that there will be no negative impacts on the natural features or their ecological functions. I've got the environmental impact study in front of me. And on page 20, there's a list of creatures, birds and turtles, bats, that all have the potential to occur within the study limits. And they use words as for their status as endangered, threatened, special concern. There's a couple that are not at risk according to the federal status, but they're of special concern in the provincial status. Birds are very sensitive to their environment. It doesn't take much to push them out of their territory. It doesn't take much for them to lose their population and become more at risk. I cannot help but think that regardless of the mitigations that are put in place here, that these creatures are going to continue to struggle worse in that space than they would if it were put into some sort of conservation. There's a reason why old miners used canaries in the mine. It was the first thing to go when there was danger in the air. These birds that are listed as endangered, these creatures that are listed as endangered or threatened, they are our canary in the coal mine. The light pollution, even though there are some mitigations offered, it does nothing to prevent the light coming out of the people's homes from inside the homes. And there are birds that absolutely, like the king rail and the least bittern, that rely on absolute darkness for their nesting and their breeding. This will be gone. It will be gone. And the people who purchase these homes, if this goes through, they're going to be sitting at their windows wondering, where are the birds? Where'd they go? I know where they went. No matter the study that's in front of me, I can't let them go without a voice. So that's my little spiel.
Thank you. Anything further for members of council? Councilor Paredes.
Through the chair, thank you. Director Walsh, there's one other thing that's recently come out that I'm hoping you can clarify. There's some discussion about Sullivan Street, and that perhaps the access way to the condominium runs through Sullivan Street. To the best of my knowledge, Sullivan Street, or what used to be Sullivan Street, is municipal property. And have we sold this property to the developer so that he can use it as an access way? If we've not done so, then where would he gain access to his site? Directly from the end of Elgin? And I guess if that were the case, he would lose his first building block plus a bunch of parking spots. So again, I'm not certain. It's ancient history, a little bit of ancient history in Brighton, but the issue has come up recently, and I just thought I'd ask for some clarification, please.
Thank you. Mr. Warren, Director Walsh, thank you.
Through the mayor council. Yes, there was some comments from a neighbor in the area identifying that Sullivan Road allowance had been closed through road closure bylaw in the 90s, if not early 90s or 1990. And looking at on-land records, those same records that Land Titles Office compiles through registered documents, it does make reference to Sullivan being closed, particularly that section north of Elgin Street East, but by inference, it appears to be also south of Elgin Street East. So there is a condition in response to that, drafted in 7D, indicating that there needs to be a report from an Ontario land surveyor and a lawyer indicating what the full status of Sullivan Street is and Elgin Street East might be, and that prior to any development agreement, that there be a design for maintenance turnaround at the end of Elgin Street East, sufficient to meeting the standards of TAC and OPS, all to the satisfaction of the municipal engineer. So they're going to need to get into the details of the actual tenure of the road allowance and why the municipal, why not the municipal lawyer, but their lawyer is going to have to show as well that if there has been reliance on municipal turnaround on land that's not necessarily under a public title, and if it has some other legal status, such as similar to a forest road status, which is kind of common, then the legal opinion can also bring forward some light on that if that's applicable. But anyway, we did acknowledge that as an issue, and make sure it's being tracked appropriately through condition number 7D.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask Councillor Butwell if she has any questions, because she's not able to raise her hand. And the deputy clerk's just going to unmute you, I think.
Hello?
Very loud, but yes.
All right, sorry about that. I don't have any further questions to ask. I do want to thank my colleagues on council and staff for all the hard work and all the reading that's been done and all the preparation that's been done, but I do not have any further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Butwell. Any further questions or comments from members of council? Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Thank you again, Mayor. Just a comment regarding affordable housing. And once again, from our official plan, the municipality will plan for and encourage proper and readily available affordable housing units for current and potential residents. Also in the report you have here, that to achieve the county's affordable housing target allowance, to Brighton regarding additional residential units, the owner will provide an adequate supply. Do we know if the owner or the developer is prepared to do that? Have we heard anything? I haven't really found any comments where he seems to be encouraged to do.
Director Walsh.
To the mayor, to Deputy Mayor. Yes, so staff presented to the applicant that the issue of affordable housing is there in the PPS and it's something that needs to be addressed, and indicated also to the applicant that as you've identified, Deputy Mayor, that county's given us a bit of a target in terms of affordable housing through additional dwelling units. And I think the last two previous subdivisions, we've had a standard condition requiring a minimum of 10% of the units, usually the detached and the semi-detached, which doesn't apply here. But that 10% would supply additional dwelling units. The applicant then acknowledged that and concurred, and I indicated that you can expect that to be a condition as drafted. And so there is, this is not a surprise to the applicant that this has been put in as, imposed as a condition, and that can be found on condition number 8. And it's the same wording essentially as the draft conditions on the previous two subdivisions.
Thank you both. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't come in here with my mind made up, and I've changed it twice today already. So thank you all for that discussion. That was helpful. I tend to think when I write, and so I did write some comments, and the goal of them is understanding. So please bear with me for a few moments. To say that this issue has dominated the first year of the council would be an understatement. The application was formally filed right around the time we were installed as a council. I've learned so much over this past year. This proposal has provided us with a masterclass in environmental and planning regulation, public engagement, and change management, and we've had a lot of time to think through the implications of this development. I can't say enough how much I appreciate the residents who share their thoughts with us. For the most part, comments have been very constructive. I have mostly felt like residents have partnered with council and staff in thinking the matter through rather than confronting us or accusing us. And even where tempers have been expressed, I am sympathetic. This is a big change in a community already experiencing a lot of change through processes that are complex and not particularly clear to most. I've tried to shed light on the process and regulations, and I've had a lot of positive feedback on that. And I'm grateful to live in a community that wants to engage and work together. And I know that the process has been made stronger because of it. We found a lot of stuff in the original reports because you all stood up at the microphone. So I'm grateful for that. And I know that has made a difference because all of these things have been addressed in the draft of plan approval that we have before us. There's a line for line. This is what people said. This is how we've addressed it. And I know that not everything is addressed to the satisfaction of residents, but they have been addressed to the satisfaction of the law and regulatory requirements, which is how we make decisions. There's one part that Councillor Wright addressed just now that stood out to me in January and still stands out as a whole in the regulatory structure, the light pollution. They did agree to dark sky compliance, or at least to light mitigation. I was going to ask, could we ensure that it is at a standard of dark sky compliance rather than just general mitigation? Because I know this is not something that is actually regulated. This is a volunteer organization. But the light from windows is a serious problem that still really concerns me. And it's the one thing that I haven't found addressed in all of the things. I want to commend our staff for addressing so thoroughly every one of those resident concerns. And let's be frank, neighbors, if we are asking questions about the reports, we are also asking questions about the people who have peer reviewed them and their expertise and their thoroughness. And I have full confidence in our staff. They don't give us bad reports to deal with. And this one is more thorough than most. So thank you for your work. And that omission of dealing with the lights from the window, that's not an omission, because that's not something that is regulated. Lower Trent used to have more power to regulate impacts on species. They do not anymore. I went and talked to them myself. I asked Gage, do you stand by this report? And he says, yes, according to the regulatory powers that we have no problem here. What's left unsaid there is that he can't say more and won't say more. But I trust his expertise too. So I'm struggling with this. And I know that we all have a lot of reasons why we might not feel good about this. And yet the report, the draft plan of approval, addresses each one of those problems one by one. And so by the end of it, I'm left wondering, why do I still not feel good about this? I'm reminded of social scientific research called moral foundation theory. I first read about it about 10 years ago. It looks at moral judgments to determine how people think. And it found that we tend to make a moral judgment first, and then we use our reasoning to justify how we feel. And we all do this almost all of the time. And the genius of this research is that it shows how it works. When you take away all of the objections and it still doesn't feel good, we don't necessarily know why. We end up saying, it's still wrong. I don't know why, but it's just wrong. And that's how I feel today. Back in January, when all of the problems were raised, I thought, I need to reserve judgment until it's time for us to make our judgment. But back then I was kind of thinking, there's no way they're going to pull this together. There's no way they can address all of those concerns. But over the past year, they did, with that one exception. So I've spent the past year, sorting through my feelings about this, knowing that it's not just the reasons, but it's also how I feel about it, knowing that you're all going through the same process. And even in this moment, I don't know what I'm going to say or where I'm going to raise my hand. But I do want to say that we don't just have to protect pristine environments, which this lot itself is not. It's the last lot in Gosport, and if they have to follow all of these environmental requirements, it will probably be the most environmentally protected lot in Gosport. Because none of the existing structures had to go through all of these additional steps that are being proposed here. But we don't just have to protect pristine environments and even non-pristine environments. We also have to learn to live alongside nature. And that's something that I think about quite a bit, because unless we're deciding that no more humans should exist, unless we want to start putting population caps, we need to learn how to live alongside nature, or relearn that. And this is not perfect by any means, but it's far sight better than we've had up to this point. So I want to give credit where it's due. They put in a lot of work to try and get us to that line where they can say, and where they had all of the experts say, they can be confident that there's going to be no significant impact.
Ladies and gentlemen, there were public consultations and statutory public meetings at which you all got to have your say, and council listened very carefully. Now it's council's turn, and Council Wheeldon is trying to work his way through this one, so we're going to give him the patience that we gave you during all of those proceedings. So thank you very much. Councilor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander. I really appreciate that. I'm a committed environmentalist. Part of me wants to turn down any development that would cut down even a single tree. And I cried when the tree in my own front yard needed to be cut down. But I recognize that my affection for trees and even our common dependence on our natural environment doesn't outweigh the legal right of a property owner to develop a specific property. If I followed this feeling, nothing would ever be built anywhere. Maybe what I'd like, but it's not socially or economically sustainable. Over the last several years, I've come to believe that the best thing we can do to preserve undeveloped land at the municipal level is to update our official plan to require more density in the development so that our community grows upward instead of outward. And we'll be looking at the official plan in 2024, so please come out and engage in that public participation. But by having more dense development, we can save much more land from being developed at all, saving places that are more ecologically intact than any lot in Gosport. For all of its wonderful natural features, this land has visible debris and garbage. The soil has been extensively disturbed, and it's surrounded by long-standing neighborhoods. It is already thoroughly impacted by human presence. If impact on the adjacent marsh could be mitigated, it would be a good candidate for development in an area that is already thoroughly developed. So I think my negative feelings about the project in general are rooted in this inner conflict that I have, because part of me doesn't want to give up another inch of nature for any reason. But I know that that's not realistic, and the next best thing is to mitigate the impacts as much as possible and increase density so that we have smaller footprints per capita. And that's what we're seeing here. So my hope tonight is that everyone goes away understanding how much thought, attention, and care we've put into this decision. You have been heard very thoroughly. I hope that we can be heard too. We've weighed the issue very carefully, and at the end of this, I find, well, that a big part of my heart wants to say no. I have only one concrete reason left to do so, and that's that light pollution. So whether I feel good about it or not, we're down to it. That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Wheeldon. Anything further from members of council? I do have one question before we call the vote. Mr. Warren, you mentioned that there were some outstanding reviews to be done, some study reviews to be done. Would it not have been wise for the developer to finish that process before bringing this to council?
Through the chair, through yourself, it's really just where we generally have it in developments of this size. It's not usually every final T has been crossed and every I dotted. It's very common to have a preliminary and then maybe a draft peer review or a draft that does get peer reviewed, but the final not until conditions of draft approval. And when we were satisfied that the legislation was in place and the application was as complete as we were going to get at that point, we felt it was time for council to make a decision on it.
Very well, thank you for that. And you mentioned that final consideration for draft plan would come back to council. That's not a delegated authority on staff at this stage?
It is not for the final approval of that plan of condominium and the agreement that goes with it.
Very well, thank you. So I'll ask one more time if there's anything further for members of council, and we'll unmute Councillor Butwell to make sure that she doesn't still have any final comments before I make a final comment and call the vote. So
I've just
Councillor,
unmuted. I don't have any final comment or question.
thank you. So just to echo one of Councillor Wilden's comments, council does not go into this decision lightly, whichever way it goes. I haven't got a clue which way it's going to go, quite frankly. It's been a lengthy process. We have, and thank you all who made presentations. It made coming to where we are today a good deal easier, given the pushback to the developer and making the developer and their consultants provide us with good information, or what we hope is good information to help us make a decision. I would note that the waterfront master plan, had we started down the road of the waterfront master plan 13 years ago, several things in Gosport would not have happened that have happened over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, including 2 flooding events. So that's the 2 flooding events and this development. So I find it interesting that sometimes we say no to things that lead us down a road that makes it difficult for us to mitigate against. And with that, members of council, I'll call the vote.
A recorded vote, please.
You may. Recorded vote has been requested by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley. Madam Deputy Clerk, the vote will be called in alphabetical order, starting with the councillor who asked for the vote, which was Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Interim Deputy Mayor Emily Rowley? No. Councillor Ann Butwell?
No.
Councillor Byron Ferrettis? Councillor Jeff Wielden? Councillor Bobby Wright? No. Mayor Brian Ostrander?
No. So before you clap, I want to say 2 things. First of all, we're going to read a motion to confirm council's decision this evening. It was my hard-learned experience that if we just say no to a staff report of this nature and it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal without council having made a motion that sort of tells people why, tells the tribunal why, the tribunal will simply overturn the decision of council without any thought. And that said, ladies and gentlemen, I would fully expect that this decision will go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So this isn't over for the neighborhood or for the municipality. The municipality will defend our decision at the Ontario Land Tribunal, as it is right and good to do so. So the motion that is before me that I will read for council, I will need a mover and a seconder on, and then we can discuss the wording if you'd like to change it in any way, shape, or form. Whereas council has reviewed and considered the planning report for application sub 2022-01 and sub Z 13-2022 for applicant JRB Williams Enterprises, Inc. And whereas council has reviewed and considered comments received through the statutory public meeting on the same planning matter. Whereas the municipal official plan, section 3.1.8 required development to have regard for the character and quality of established neighborhoods. And whereas section 4.3.2 of the OPA requires in reviewing redevelopment or infilling or intensification plans, council will ensure that the character of the residential area will be maintained or enhanced and that such redevelopment will not burden existing facilities and services. Now therefore be it resolved that council receives the staff report for planning files sub 2022-01 and Z 13-2022. And further that council does not support the zoning bylaw amendment application Z 13-2022 and draft plan of condominium application sub 2022-01 as presented by staff. Is there any further? Oh yeah, I do. I need a mover because it ain't on the floor. Moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley. Is there a seconder? Councilor Wright. Is there any discussion on this motion? Councilor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go.
I gotta say, I'm not super comfortable with the comments about the character of the neighborhood, given not only that we have reports suggesting that it is not in violation of the character of the neighborhood, but also that that is not defined even in the definition that Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley gave us, that is specific enough to say why we're going against that. Gosport has a very eclectic built environment. There's everything from large expensive homes to little fishing cottages in that small bit of land. So to say the character of the neighborhood, I can't even imagine what that refers to. There's a little bit of everything, and that's wonderful. But I don't understand the argument against that, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with it.
Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could read maybe I should have done that earlier, read the complete definition that's part of the mature neighborhood study. I just kind of gave you a small, so I'll read the whole thing. Neighborhood character means the collective physical qualities and characteristics which are prevalent in a neighborhood area or mature neighborhood area and which informs its identity. These qualities, characteristics may include, but shall not be limited to, such features as street network and design, lot configuration and patterns, location and orientation on the lot in relation to adjacent lots and buildings, lot areas and width, building height and design, facade articulation and materials, trees, vegetation, and other natural features, heritage resources, and age of construction. Does that make it a little clearer, Councillor?
Thank you. That's much clearer. Appreciate that.
I apologize for not reading the whole definition earlier.
It was a lot of words. We get it. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Butwell, do you have anything on this motion to comment on? I think she's muted. Oh, there she goes.
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Do we have a recorded vote on this motion then?
Are
In
you
order to
calling the
include
recorded vote, Acting Deputy Mayor? Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk, and recorded vote has been requested by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
To clarify, that's on the motion that you just read, correct? Just to make sure everybody's
This is
aware.
on the motion I just read to not support.
Right.
Deputy Mayor Rowley,
Yes.
Councillor Ann Butwell,
Yes.
Counselor Byron Paredes,
Yes.
Counselor Jeff Wielden,
Yes.
Counselor Bobby Ray. Yes. Mayor Brian Ostrander.
Yes.
Is carried.
Thank you. Brings us to our next staff report, the approval for draft plan official plan amendment number 15, OPA 01-2023, and a policy amendment, Parks and Recreation, and a bylaw to establish parkland dedication. Maybe we'll take a 10-minute recess. I know you're saying nice things, Mrs. Sarah, but I gotta call this meeting back to order. I know you're saying. All right, it's 7:57. I'll call the meeting back to order. And Director Walsh, we've read your report. Sorry, we're on approval of draft plan amendment number 15, a bylaw to establish parkland dedication. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing further to add, Mayor.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the staff report dated December 11th, 2023, regarding passing the following bylaws. Official plan amendment number 15 being municipal file number OPA 01-2023, a policy amendment to section 3.8 Parks and Recreation, and the parkland dedication bylaw as prepared for this report. And then if approved, council directs staff to forward the record of adoption of the OPA number 15 to County Council for final approval. And that if approved, council directs staff to administer the revised Parks and Recreation policy and the past parkland dedication bylaw for all applications currently in pre-consultation. Existing draft approved subdivisions or provisionally approved consents are to be subject to parkland policies and requirements in place prior to council's passing of the bylaws. Is there any discussion? And Councillor Butwell, do you have any comments?
No, I do not.
I'm just going to call the vote, and if you want to say yay or nay, you may. All those in favor?
Yay.
There being none opposed, the motion's carried.
Sorry if that's too loud.
Just loud enough. There are no items for information purposes. We have no unfinished business listed. That brings us into bylaws. The first bylaw is not relevant. You may. Councillor Wright.
Can we still keep the zoning for environmental protections on those two parts?
Of the current lands,
Yeah, of the Elgin Street?
whatever existed before this meeting started exists still now. We
Okay,
haven't
so
changed anything.
Yes, but isn't that what this bylaw is to do, is to change the? Just for the purpose of development?
This
Okay,
this
never
bylaw would be to
Right.
amend the zoning
Got it.
bylaw. Yeah. We're good? Carry on. The next is a bylaw to adopt the revised Parks and Rec policies and OPA. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to adopt revised Parks and Recreation policies as an amendment to the official plan of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And to govern parkland and open space dedication bylaw, it's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to govern parkland and open space dedication in the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And the sale of lands, part lot 34, Sharp Road, 2594976, Ontario Incorporated. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement of purchase of sale of lands, part lot 34, concession B, Brighton, part 3, plan 39R, 13745 Sharp Road Industrial Park, purchaser 259476. All right. So on the report, it says 2594976. And in the motion, it says 259476. So someone tell me which it is. I think you're probably right. In the actual body of the bylaw itself, it also says 2594976. So I'm changing the motion to read 2594976. Is that okay with you, Councillor Wright and Councillor Wheeldon? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yay.
There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Which brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has a question with anything that is on tonight's agenda? None noted. We have no closed session. Which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw, moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Municipality of Brighton Council planning meeting held on December 11th, 2023. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Yay.
There being none opposed, that motion's carried. You really feel the Zoom delay, can't you? And a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the December 11th, 2023 council planning meeting adjourn at 8:03 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed?